Before we can get started with our rock, paper, scissors application, we need to make sure that we understand the last data type that we're going to look at in this chapter or today, and that's going to be strings. So strings allow us to store a set of characters and basically words and also paragraphs and very long texts and stuff we can store inside of a string variable. So let's look at that real quick. So here in the documentation, we can see vol string, and then we can just assign something. And we can use any Unicode letter inside of a string. So anything that we have seen in the list of Unicodes, we can store inside of a string inside of Kotlin. So he's using for c in str. So basically what this does is it just says, okay, a string is actually just a summary, like a collection of characters or of chars. So that's what this tries to do. So elements of a string are characters that you can access via the indexing operation s inside of brackets I. So you can iterate over these characters with a for loop. So it assumes that you understand what a for loop is when explaining strings, but usually you don't know what a for loop is before you use strings, which is why I really think the documentation has its limitations as a starting guide. So you might see me use it quite a bit in the last few hours or like today, but at the same time, I'm not super happy with how it explains like the stuff for an absolute beginner. But let's just look at str, a, b, c, d, uppercase. So these are very nice examples, I believe still. So let's go ahead and create a new variable, and I'm going to call this one name. And this will contain a string, and you can create the string data type just by using the quotations. So by using quotations, you are saying this variable is of type string, even if there's nothing in there. So now at this point, name is a string. It is an empty string. There's nothing in there, but it is of type string. So we can test that by using println again and just using name and then printing it out. So let's print it out and we will see we get nothing. So it did print something out, but this thing that it printed out is empty. So there's nothing in there, but it is not null. So it's not really empty in that regard, but it is a empty string. So we will see what null is later on, but I just wanted to quickly state that here. So we have this var name, and now I can go ahead and say Dennis in here. So let's rerun this, and my name now will be printed and it says Dennis. Well, that's my name. So now because I'm using var, it's complaining because it says, hey, you're never changing name. So now, yeah, let's underline it and say you should instead use val because you're never changing it. So it's immutable, right? That's what it assumes. But what if I want to change my name from Dennis to Frank? So suddenly it's not complaining about it anymore. It's fine with it. And we can rerun it and you will see that now it's going to display Frank. So now we can store paragraphs in here. Very long paragraphs can be stored inside of strings. Okay, so let's rerun this and it will say very long paragraphs can be stored inside of strings, even though that's just a sentence, but I could go ahead and copy and paste the string quite a few times and then I would have a very long string. Okay, so that's basically the thing about strings. Now you can use certain functions onto strings. Okay, so strings are objects, and we saw earlier almost everything inside of Kotlin is treated like an object, and we will see what objects are later on. But basically, objects allow us to run functions of them. So functions in combination with objects are methods, and we're going to see that later on once we get to functions. But I just want to quickly show you what that means. And here there is this thing called toUpper or uppercase. Where is it? Lowercase here. So for example, let's use lowercase. All right, so if I use this lowercase, what it will do is it will change everything in here to lowercase when printing it out. So name, instead of long, I'm going to write long like this. And now let's rerun this and we will see that it will say very long paragraphs that can be stored inside of strings. So instead of writing it with uppercase, it now used lowercase. So now I can, however, do the same thing with uppercase. So let's rerun that, and now it will write every single character inside of my string as an uppercase. So that's just for you to give you an idea that you can modify strings very easily inside of Kotlin using these kind of functions, these special cool things. So this uppercase basically is the same thing as this println, in the sense that it is a function that can be executed, as the same thing as main, which is also a function that can be executed. And now this uppercase function can be executed on strings, so it can modify strings. This is just one example. Now you can play around with this, but just pressing the button dot here, and then you can add something to it with the plus function / method and so forth. There is a lot more that you can use here, but that's just to give you an idea. So now what you can do is you can concatenate strings. So name now is treated like Dennis. Okay, now I can go ahead and add empty space Panjuta to it. Now what this will do is it will add Panjuta to name. So let me rerun this, even though it's complaining a little bit, but still it's going to say very long paragraphs can be stored inside of strings Panjuta. So obviously I had this line. So can you recall what we did a few videos back when we wanted to comment something out? So when we wanted to make sure that the text that comes after those special characters is not going to be considered by our compiler or by our Android Studio. Can you remember? It was /. So now it's grayed out. So this code here, which was code, but now it's not code anymore. Now it just commented out text. Okay. And now if I rerun this application out, it will say Dennis Panjuta. So there we are. It says Dennis Panjuta. And that is because this overwriting of my name variable is not true anymore. So it just says Dennis, whatever the state was, and then plus, and then I have this other string Panjuta. So I could call this variable first name, and then I could create another variable last name, and this one would be Panjuta. And now I could use first name plus last name, and that will then print out Dennis Panjuta, but connected. So you see it says Dennis Panjuta without an empty space. So if I wanted to add an empty space in here, I can just add it like this. So this is an empty space in between, and now if I rerun it, it will say Dennis Panjuta. Okay, so these are just some little examples what you can do with strings, and we will see a lot more that we can do with strings. And one of those special characters that we've seen was this /n. N creates a new line. So if I rerun this, it says Dennis Panjuta, and there is this empty space as well. So \n breaks the line and does whatever it comes after in the next line, or writes whatever comes after in the next line. So that's what this \n does. We saw this \tab when we were working with characters, just a very tad bit, and you see it created this tab entry. So that's what this \tab does. All right, so this is just to give you a little bit of a nuanced understanding of what strings are. And whenever you use quotations, internally it's treated like a string. All right, so that's it for this video. In the next one, we can finally get started with our rock, paper, scissors application, but we will not be able to finish it yet because we are lacking two very important things before we do that. And actually, I believe we should start with those first. Yeah, we should do that. All right, so see you in the next video where we're going to look at if statements.